October 15, 1808 and 4, one of the greatest and most enigmatic geniuses in history was born. A prodigy of European intellectuality, at the age of 24, he already held a teaching position at a renowned university. Despite the promising future, he chose to break with everything and seek solitude. Retiring to a remote location, he conceived some of the most grandiose and controversial philosophical ideas of all time. His philosophy exposed the incongruity of conventions and revealed the dark side of human motivations, morality, and ethics. After revolutionizing the world with his thoughts, Nietzsche succumbed to madness. It is speculated that the burden of ideas, truths too heavy for a human being to bear, was the trigger for his downfall. The true story of a man who, by unveiling the veils and masks of humanity, society, nature, and the universe, ended up being consumed by his own vision. Today, we embark on a journey to unravel the life and philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche. Hello, curious minds, and welcome back to Deciphering Stories. I'm your host, Luca Schultz, and today we're going to dive into the life of one of the greatest geniuses of humanity, Friedrich Nietzsche. But before we embark on this journey of discovery and adventure, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Stay with me until the end of this video and you will be amazed by the story of this magnificent man who shaped critical thinking from his time. Without further ado, let's go to the video. God is dead, and we killed him. This is one of Nietzsche's most profound and impactful thoughts, and when we delve deep into his story, we discover that by chance, he was the son and grandson of pastors, but ended up developing a completely contrary vision to Christianity. This rebellious aspect is something that we will find frequently in Nietzsche's life. He constantly criticized both the philosophy and culture of his time, and even though he was a genius, his books never sold well, and he had great difficulty in relating to people. And even in the midst of all these problems, Nietzsche produced concepts and philosophies capable of provoking and changing for the better the lives of many people, starting with his way of evaluating life. For him, life should be evaluated for itself, and not by an ideal, not in terms of something perfect or future. That is, by the things that could happen. For him, life is enough on its own, because each moment lived is the result of an equation that will always have unique ingredients, that is, there is no ideal or something desired. Everything that exists in the now and in the present. According to him, life should be lived and not idealized, because it will never be possible to create a life similar to the one imagined. In our heads, the variables are extremely controlled, while in the real world we don't even come close to that. Nietzsche says not to sacrifice life for an ideal. We must live the real experience. Life must be lived and not just imagined. Think with us. If after each action taken, you reflect on how it positions itself in relation to the ideal, you will end up creating a mental prison for yourself. The real will never be as imagined. When we talk about Nietzsche, most people automatically think of nihilism, and he really transformed and modified the view of nihilism, which was nothingness. By delving into and criticizing this philosophy, he argued that many philosophical reflections will diminish our sensations, our concrete experiences, our emotions, and our vital energy. These are repressed in our minds in favor of what is considered ideal by the majority. His criticism is for all the concepts that belittle what we feel and consequently make us end up venerating idols. Idols, in Nietzsche's philosophy, can be understood as absolute values or perfect ideals. If you're a little confused, don't worry, I'll explain. A simple way to understand Nietzsche is to compare him to Plato, the creator of the allegory of the cave. We can say that Nietzsche approached similar themes to Plato, but in a practically and totally opposite way. Plato's philosophy asks us to leave the cave, belittling our dark interior, telling us to give up our desires and experiences in the name of the pure use of reason, as if it were an elevated consciousness, while Nietzsche tells us to do exactly the opposite, staying inside the cave and respecting everything that happens there. That is, our experiences, our desires, and what really beats inside the being. During this video, we will see that Nietzsche enjoyed life. He loved life the way it is, even with flaws, even with the illusions that we face. And for a long time we have learned that only the ideal has value, causing our desires to be belittled, creating the idea that what matters are the things that transcend our desires. And then, according to our mustachioed friend, a true nihilist is not someone who lives life in a disorganized way without direction and values, but rather someone who, in the name of an ideal or absolute principle, ends up denying real life, ends up denying what we feel, ends up denying what happens in the now. Idols are a type of mental model or rule that ends up depriving us of real existence in exchange for an ideal. For him, you should not live according to something. We should not let idols control our lives, because by doing so we deny ourselves and start to live in disagreement with our own desires, and that is where human suffering arises. Idols can also be known as religious models of thinking, in the sense of fitting life into patterns that serve everyone, submitting us to evaluation of the good or the bad type, of right or wrong. And from then on, life starts to be boxed and valued according to the rules created by this way of thinking. That is, it ceases to be something in itself and becomes a function of a controlling rule. We can always judge our life and actions through some ideal external to us. For example, the number of likes on a photo, the wonderful life of other people, moments that were left in the past, or anything that we project or are projected by the world. And this is a fight that we must win. And now, I don't think we necessarily need to let go of religion or all values if we don't want to, but maybe start to realize how good or bad our idols make us. The solution that Nietzsche found for this is what he calls the eternal recurrence, which would be a yardstick for evaluating life based on itself. For him, life is good when you have no problem repeating it. So in this way, we should not evaluate life through external things, but rather by the feeling caused by itself. The main question to identify a good or bad life is to know if you would agree to repeat it tirelessly. Nietzsche thought that life is good when you don't want the end, that is, when you're not looking at the clock wishing time would pass faster, when you don't think about anything in the future or the past, but rather living in the present moment, tirelessly wishing for its eternal duration. Now, when you yearn for the end of a moment, the life experienced is in the worst possible phase. And of course it is impossible to live a wonderful life at all times. All human beings will go through challenges and through bad situations. Nietzsche's hope, in fact, is that by following our desires, we end up greatly diminishing the occurrence of negative situations. And I believe that the central point of this part of Nietzsche's philosophy is to provoke us to be attentive to life. Often, we live without reflecting, without thinking if our moments are making us feel good, if we are in fact living a good life, living the life that will not make us regret in the end. The problem is that for most of our lives we learn to evaluate our experience and our results through an ideal external to us. An A grade of 10 on a test, going to college to be someone in life, having to value common pleasures for society, the car, the house, the perfect job. And because of this, we end up neglecting the most important thing of all, the unique experience of each being, the emotion, what is felt when performing an action. The eternal recurrence must happen in the present moment and not at a time after the situation. Your action should not be rewarded by something that happens after it, but rather by the experience generated by itself at the time of the action. From Nietzsche's perspective, his philosophy preached strength, with one of its main points being his idea of love fati. Love fati means love of destiny. For Nietzsche, it is not just tolerating the things that happen, otherwise it would be called tolerating fati. For him, this concept implies loving the world and things exactly as they are, an unrestricted acceptance of reality. This may seem impossible, right? There will be moments that we will never be able to love, but we should make these the exception and not the rule, because the world is the way it is, and not the way we would like it to be. I think it is good to make it very clear that he never said at any time that we are obliged to follow every aspect of his philosophy, but we should accept life as it is, desires as they are, and follow a sincere journey in search of the realization of our desires, denying any kind of rule or impediment that deprives us of what we really want. And there is a reflection that I think is very good, which I took from the book and movie When Nietzsche Wept, which is a combination of his philosophy, of what he thought. He never wrote exactly this, but he wrote something very close, which is the following. What if a demon told you that this life, as you live it and have lived it in the past, you would have to live again, countless times more, and there would be nothing new in it? Every pain, every joy, everything would return to you, the same succession, the same sequence over and over again. Imagine the infinite as if it were an hourglass that you turn and turn and turn and turn. Imagine the infinite. Consider the possibility that every act you choose, you will choose forever, for all eternity. Do you like this idea or do you hate it? Does it bring you fear or comfort? Another great question raised by Nietzsche is, what is right and what is wrong? Who chooses it? Who invented morality? I want to make a video specifically about this, but briefly for Nietzsche, morality was something created by people driven by the reactive force, that is, those who act in response to something. Their objective is to deprive beings driven by the active force, those who only seek their will to power. Others only have the objective of delaying them because they denied their own search. Have you ever had to deal with something like this? Throughout life, from childhood to the present, we come across two predominant groups in the world. One follows all the rules, seeking to achieve an ideal imposed by society. The other, despite its clear differences, faces persecution due to its tireless desire to affirm its own individuality and power. Despite his brilliant philosophical insights, Nietzsche suffered a tragic and arguably one of the worst possible fates. At the age of 44, while in Italy, he experienced a mental breakdown. He ran out into the street upon witnessing a horse being whipped by its driver, embracing the animal and crying, "I understand you, I understand you." This event occurred in 1889, and he never fully recovered. He endured a long and agonizing 11 years until his death, spending his last days in a severely debilitated mental state, unable to engage in any intellectual activity, and completely withdrawn from the outside world. While the exact cause of his illness remains unknown, I believe that the physical and emotional stress of his intense lifestyle, combined with his philosophical and emotional preoccupations, certainly played a role. Nietzsche's life was marked by a series of hardships and inner conflicts that undoubtedly contributed to his eventual demise. He experienced numerous tragedies and traumatic events throughout his life, including the loss of his father and brother, as well as extremely complicated personal and professional relationships. His relentless pursuit of meaning and truth, coupled with his radical critique of morality and religion, brought him into conflict with many of the dominant values and ideals of his time, which undoubtedly took a toll on his mental health. Furthermore, Nietzsche consistently struggled to establish lasting and meaningful relationships, which may have contributed to a sense of isolation and loneliness. We know that this is the ultimate form of punishment for a human being. Solitary confinement is the worst prison cell. His writings reveal a profound understanding of human nature and a persistent concern with the condition of man in the modern world, issues that undoubtedly added pressure to his mind. Despite his genius, he was still human.